and then like they'll unmute you.
Yes.
But all
Easy.
of the interviews.
Easy.
Across history.
Cool.
Okay, let's begin.
Yay.
So, yeah, just before we get started with everything, can you please introduce yourself, your name, degree, and what year?
Yeah. Hi. I'm Bohao Zhang. I am a law student, like many people going for election this cycle. I'm also studying economics with a major in econometrics. I'm a second year. I came to Australia as an international student. I've been very much involved in the international student side of campus life. That has amounted to being VP of the SRC and pushing for the International Students Collective to become an active collective that is outputting events that are consistent for international students and also working on advocacy issues. For example, a big thing was the Free Fares campaign in 2024, where we were trying to get Opal card concessions for part-time and more importantly, and equally importantly, international students.
Yeah. What is your favorite USU venue on campus?
Oh, has to be courtyard because of the people you meet there.
Yeah, interesting. Why are you running for board?
Well, I feel like I've had some experience in the Student Representative Council, and in it I've tried to push for policy changes and events that really impact international student life and student life in general. And especially in my interactions with Food Hub in the capacity as VP of the SRC, I felt the USU is a body that has more funding and has more, is more prioritized by the university in terms of negotiations or in terms of just looking for an outlet and a way to output something that maximizes student life. And that is something that I want to help the university achieve, because coming to the University of Sydney as an international student, you really do feel like there's a lack of community here. There's so many students, so many online classes that it's very hard to form solid, consistent friend groups. And that's something the USU has so much more potential to be able to do. And at the same time, also making sure the USU is a body that is providing cheap food, that is affordable, that can help international students and domestic students alike live in a cost of living crisis here in Australia.
Yeah, amazing. Can you please tell us what are your top 3 policies that you have?
I think in general, they could be amounted to one, advocating for international students, and that means campaigns like the Free Fares campaign, but also, as I mentioned in the quiz, the International House campaign, reopening International House, and also transforming the International Student Lounge into a place that it's a really good place now, don't get me wrong, but I think there should also be specific events in there that are specifically for international students, like English corners, and developing stuff like that. So that is one of the policies. Another policy of mine is making sure that campus is affordable. And what I mean by that is not just like making sure that there are more venues for food or cheaper food, but I think something that's more actionable is looking at the $5 meal, the success of that, and seeing if we can copy that framework into making it applicable to breakfast and dinner as well as lunch, because currently the cafeteria is only open during lunch. And there are innovative ways to do this. For example, SUSF has their $5 My Muscle Chef meals, and similarly, Food Hub has a service in Castle Learning Hub where you can get $5 microwave meals. But I want to expand it into something that there's a real kitchen that's actually cooking up the meals. And similarly, on a similar vein, Food Hub, you can only take 5 items right now, 7 if you're donating items. I'd really like to see Food Hub expand, increase its funding, advocate for that in terms of staff negotiations with the university to make Food Hub a place where students are able to, there are more tickets every day, people are able to go in, take more things, and maybe even open up smaller food hubs around campus. For example, what's being done at Supra independently, they have in their reception a mini food hub. I think it would be amazing if the USU funds services like this for Supra, for SRC, so that these organizations can spend more money on advocating for students, which is their niche anyways. And so that's about cheaper food and affordability on campus. Sorry, and my last policy, I'm so sorry, is about clubs and societies. So I think one of the main contributors the USU does for student life is in terms of funding all of these clubs and societies, around 200 or so. I think the USU should dedicate more money in this area, because it is one of the ways it can outreach and impact students so efficiently, because it's utilizing the talents of all of these execs who do their work for free, mind you. And for the grants, like for a society right now, a small society, so maximum around 120 members, which is still a lot of members. you're only looking at $950 a semester. I don't think that's enough. For an event like that is good, that attracts members, that is consistent, you might be spending $300, $200. That means 3 events a semester. That's not very sustainable for society. So, and oftentimes these societies will go out and they will find sponsors, or they'll find suppliers, or etc. And sometimes that's good, it's a collaboration between the society, but when I talk to international student societies, especially from the Chinese side, they're finding contract cheaters. That's not good. The USU is forcing these societies, because they can't run their own events, to go out to like very questionable companies and firms. And I feel like the USU should just fund these societies in the first place.
Yeah. It's very extensive.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize again.
Sorry. Like, it shows you've put a lot of work
Thank
and
you.
thinking into those policies. And leading into that, I guess, can you pick one of those policies, the many policies that you just named, and could you please tell us how did you come up with it? Was it your idea? Who did you consult or talk to before deciding that this is a priority of yours?
I think the best example of this would be in regards to cheaper food on campus, and I'd like to focus on Food Hub, just only talking about Food Hub right now. Food Hub is a service that is located on level 3 of Wentworth. It's been there since the 2020s. As I took over in the SRC as VP, when I read the SRC constitution, I realized that Food Hub was one of my primary duties, and I wanted to really improve the service and make sure that the service was working for students. So I reached out to Fiona, who is the one of the managers in the USU that is responsible for operations at retail. She's also responsible for graduation now, she got promotion. So I talked to her, and then she put me in touch with Hamish, who is one of the main coordinators of Food Hub, only Food Hub, and not the other retail providers. And by talking to them, like, one of my main takeaways was it's not really that difficult to ensure that Food Hub has more funding if there is a person on board that advocates for it. That's really, and it's coming up with creative ways to increase funding. It's not just asking for more staff. It's asking for more staff in association with the SRC, for example, because having a joint staff application really bolsters the amount of staff you can ask for, right? But that's not something that these organizations have been doing, despite the fact that the SRC has like managing Food Hub in its constitution. It seems like a natural alliance, but it's not something that these organizations have been doing. So that's something I would really look forward to just increasing the baseline funding for this program, ensuring that the program ensures that people can take more things away from the pantry, that people know more about the program, whether that be on Red Note or Instagram, there's more advertising for it. I feel like there's just so much potential there, just from a simple thing like a joint staff application. Aside from that, I would look into sponsorships. That was a big talk I had with Fiona, because there are a lot of food banks that are willing to donate things for something like Food Hub, which has proved that it is able to get these resources out to students in a needs basis and in an efficient manner. So I would really look at securing more sponsorships for the program and making sure that the volunteers for the program are reasonably happy with how it's functioning right now. Because again, these are people that don't get paid and they're volunteering their hours at Food Hub. They have a reward system, but I just want to make sure the reward system is robust and people are happy and people are willing to go to Food Hub to help out.
Moving on from the policy-related questions, can you please describe to us your politics without using the word right-wing, left-wing, progressive, or independent?
Right, okay. Let me give me 1 second to think.
It's a tricky one.
Yes, those are very key words when describing politics for me. But yeah, I would say that, would you want specific policies in that case? Is that what you're looking for?
More like your political leaning personally, like how would you describe your politics, and just don't use those umbrella terms.
Can I just use them and be more specific? Is that fine? I
just talk about like
What
how
do
do
you
you
care
view
about?
politics, and
Right.
what do you care about?
So,
what issues do you care about?
Oh, okay. That makes okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I don't
That's
know why
all
that
good.
was so hard for me
No,
to say.
it's kind of a
But
tricky
yeah,
question.
so look, as an international student in Australia, I can't vote and I'm not able to participate fully in the Australian electoral process. But as a permanent resident of New Zealand, and well, mainly New Zealand, I'll put this as I am able to vote there. And from high school and coming to uni, I've always seen politics as in its best. It's this unifying force that can really mobilize the masses into endorsing policy that is ultimately beneficial for the masses. And I think oftentimes, no matter be it an Australian or New Zealand discourse, there are these forces that try to, put up policies or ads or campaigns that target a specific group. And that's why I talk about international students, because I feel like as an international student and as an immigrant, whether that be to New Zealand or Australia, oftentimes they are the scapegoats, right? So I think at its best, politics is a unifying force. In running for the USU, that is something I would like to achieve. I want to advocate for policies that all students are able to get behind, that are baseline policies. But personally, I also I'm on the left of the spectrum in terms of international relations, in terms of a lot of issues on that end, because ultimately I do see the argument that the USU isn't able to, shape global discourse. But I still think the USU needs to take a stance. So I would stand for an activist USU, in the sense that I feel like, for example, BDS principles should be something the USU can get behind, because the USU got behind being anti-apartheid back in South Africa's regime, and being divesting from fossil fuels in 2015. I feel like these are stances that USU should take. Obviously, these stances are more controversial than like cheaper food on campus, but I think these are hard decisions, and I feel like these decisions should also be made. And those are just my leanings when it comes to those issues.
Okay, great. Are you a member of any political party?
Yes.
Can you just...
ALP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a member of any faction within USU?
Yeah, Penta. Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Oh, I guess yeah.
Why are you a part
Of Penta.
of Penta, and why are you a part of that?
So I'll do
political party?
ALP first.
Yeah.
So I'm part of the Australian Labor Party, because when I first joined the University of Sydney, one of the main things I wanted to push for was free fares, and the state government is headed by ultimately a Labor government. I wanted to help pass a policy through the party that would try to push the state government into endorsing the free fares campaign, which is what we ultimately were able to do by changing the party platform to officially support the free fares campaign, even though the government hasn't acted on it. But that was why I joined the ALP in the first place. As to if I'll stay, I don't really know, but that was the reason. And it's another secondary reason from that is because I get some representation in the ALP, because I'm not able to vote, but I am able to vote in ALP pre-selections, even though Labour Right is trying to change that as a non-citizen. But I would like to have my voice manifested in ways, and even though this is a bit of a roundabout way, because the current government is Labour, and because being a Labour member entitles me to vote in pre-selections and vote in branch motions, that's why I'm ultimately a member. And also, my politics align to a very limited extent, I would say. So that's ALP. In terms of Penta, it's because Penta is an international students faction, and is the only international students faction here in the University of Sydney, or I would dare say like across broader Australia. And that's why I joined in the first place. Before Penta, there were a lot of different factions. If this was in 2019, I don't think I'll be a member of Penta. I might be Advance, which was another international student faction. But Penta is the only one that exists right now, and that's why I'm part of Penta.
Yeah. So moving on, you mentioned something about the USU, being a more activist
Yes.
union. So do you think the USU should be more political or less political?
From what it is right now, I think it should be more political, definitely.
Why is that?
Well, I feel like the USU is ultimately firstly, it's a political platform. Like, all the language we're using are political words, whether you like it or not. You're running for election, right? You have a campaign manager. These are political things. And the body itself, like, yes, it is running as you are governing a corporation, but don't forget the name of the corporation is the University of Sydney Union. It represents University of Sydney students. Without the USU, right, you could argue there's nobody that represents all of the students in the University of Sydney, because Super is only for postgraduates, right? The SRC is only for undergraduates, right? So you could always say, like the University of Sydney students don't support this policy, because it's like if the USU doesn't comment on it, there's no definitive step. And the USU is something that is widely recognizable, whether that be by university management or by students. So I think the USU taking a stance actually shifts the discourse. And when there's something this valuable there, I think it's just a shame it's not being more political than it is right now.
Moving on, so BDS has been quite a sustained topic at the recent USU board meetings for the past few months.
Yes.
The current board has declined to adopt BDS.
Yes.
If elected, would you support the USU integrating it? Why or why not?
Yes, I would support the USU integrating it, whether it be called BDS or like an anti-apartheid. Like, I think there's conversation to be had there, but the principles definitely. Why? Because I think Israel is committing a genocide, and I think the USU should take a stance when it comes to that. And a stance shouldn't just be a motion on paper saying we condemn, right? I think there should be actions that follow through. Look, I think it's not always that easy, right? And there's always some nuance. For example, the SRC is against BDS, but some of the products we use, for example, we still use Intel computers. Like, we're not going to throw away our Intel computers just because, you know, it might be complicit in the genocide, right? But it's saying we won't buy more Intel computers. I think that's a starting step. And if the USU isn't even able to take that step, I think that's just, it's really shameful for a student union.
Yeah. At a recent board meeting, I believe it was April or March, one of the SSC councillors asked whether Coca-Cola's Welcome Fest activation was a paid sponsorship. Executive Director Zhang confirmed it was, but said USU's commercial arrangements aren't disclosed. So I have two questions. Should the USU sponsorship arrangements be publicly disclosed to members? And given Coca-Cola is named in BDS campaigns, would you have signed off on that sponsorship as a board director?
Well, firstly, I think I would address both of those questions, but I think underlying these is the policy that was put out by the USU in regards to sponsorships and advertising that really dictated how the board votes when it comes to issues like this. And I would just recall the idea of a fiduciary duty as a board director. I think the biggest mistake was passing that policy as is and not having something in that policy that is saying we're against, because this isn't the policy. They say we're against mining companies, we're against things complicit in apartheid or whatever. I think there should have been a third thing in there that's like we're against, we're for BDS principles. Like, if that was there, then this entire thing would have been solved. So I think primarily I would have changed that policy. I would have actually read the policy and tried to change it in a way that enables me to vote without worrying if I get sued by the USU board or if I'm holding to my fiduciary duties. But then addressing your questions, I would say that I think the sponsorship agreements shouldn't be, I would need to know more as a candidate or as a board director, because I think the core idea of having a sponsorship agreement is making sure that student life is beneficial. If it is easier to get these sponsorship agreements, if they're not disclosed, then I would argue then we don't disclose them. But I think the primary problem is that you're having sponsorship agreements which the student body doesn't like with companies that the students don't advocate for. I think that is the primary issue. So I don't think it's about the disclosure or the terms, it's more so the parties or the companies that you're choosing to collaborate with. Could you repeat the second part of your question, sorry?
So Coca-Cola is named in BDS campaigns.
Yeah.
Would you have signed off on that sponsorship as a board director?
Within my legal ability, no. Like, if it was something like, if I don't sign off on this because I'm not adhering to the advertising and sponsorship agreement or the sponsorship and advertising policy, then, and I would get sued by the USU board, then probabilities are, and I'll be honest, I would sign it off. But I think, again, that's a primary problem, the policy. Yeah, I wouldn't be, definitely not, I wouldn't be in favor of it. Yes.
Yeah. All good. So a bit of a scenario question again. So, let's say you get elected, how comfortable would you be publicly disagreeing with a fellow board director or let's say one of the exec members, and publicly disagreeing with them? Can you walk me through how you'd handle a moment where you think someone is wrong on a public-facing issue?
So is this just limited to board directors and not necessarily staff? I'm just checking.
Yeah, okay. Board directors or the president or the execs. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I work in the SRC, and as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of disagreements that are very public. So I would say I'm not, I'm pretty comfortable with disagreeing with people publicly. I think the core of the issue is always, I try to make sure that it's strategic, in the sense that this public disagreement will get us somewhere, instead of just fighting for the sake of fighting. So I am relatively comfortable with disagreeing with my fellow board directors, because I'm sure we'll not always agree. I mean, there are some candidates that are running that I can't think of anything we would potentially agree on. But I I wouldn't like try to take everything public. I would do it strategically, is what I would say.
Can you name one critical thing about how the USU currently operates?
One like bad thing about
Something
how
you
Yeah.
have criticism
Yeah.
of.
Well, I think there's just a lot of one of the things I really dislike right now is my USU. I think that website, spending so much money on it to look. Okay, I will first say something like it was needed, but my USU is a terrible way to do it. It looks like something from 2015. I think the USU as a company with a turnover of around 30 million, staff fees around 8.88 million, outputting a website like that is really horrific. And it's something I would look to change. So in regards to something the USU is currently operating or how it operates, I think that would be a very big pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. And I guess kind of like the opposite. What's one thing that you currently, I guess, enjoy that the USU does?
Well, I think all things considered, I think the elections the USU runs are really interesting. I think the elections help keep campus alive in semester one, and I do enjoy how the USU runs these elections, all things considered. But I think that's a very like, very like broad candidate answer. I guess I would also say clubs and societies. I think despite my issues with how much it's being funded, like not enough obviously, not like it's being funded too much, but the fact that there's 200 club societies where people can explore their interests, their passions, their hobbies, and the USU is behind them, and all these execs are really like the potential to an extent is being unlocked by the USU and the funding that is being given to these CNS clubs and societies, and also is able to engage members of the USU. I think it's really brilliant, and there is more work to be done, but I think it's a great, it's amazing, it's amazing.
Yeah. So I think circling back to the quiz earlier, have you read the 2025-28 strategic plan or skimmed it?
I have skimmed it.
Yeah. So I'm saying that, can you pick one thing you really like or agree with in the strategic plan and one thing that you disagree with?
Well, I will say the staff fees part, right? So making sure that we have a student union that is independent of staff fees. Again, I just want to say to you, Mark, I did read that. I'm not just quoting this because you told me this. I did read that part. But anyways, just making sure that's clear. I think that is a big part, and I think it's a good part of the strategic plan because I worked in the SRC for almost 2 years now. And in the SRC, one of the primary issues we have is we don't have a way to make our own money. And I'm not saying we should, but the problem that stems from this is oftentimes we are at the whim of the university. Whenever the university threatens us, we get very scared because we don't have any other financial backing. It's very limited what we are able to do. And ensuring that we have a student union, the USU, that's able to be obviously not completely independent from SAT funding, but to an extent independent is, I think, a good step forward. What was the second part of the question, sorry?
I guess within the strategic plan,
right,
which of them do you agree with? Something that you agree with and disagree with?
Well, I'm pretty sure. Again, I'm not the most familiar with the strategic plan as we have explored in the quiz, but there is a specific part about ensuring that staff are able to, building a stronger staff community. Yes, I support. But in terms of ensuring that staff get experience, like prioritizing experience, I'm not like, I think it's very vague as to what that means. And I would really like to interrogate like what that specifically involves, because if it means like we're having staff just, for example, like one thing it makes me think is it's just a way for the university to say, oh, like this is your job, but let's also have you do this. I feel like that's not what a good employer should be doing, and I feel staff should be, they should be comfortable and happy with how they're being managed by the USU and the work that they're doing.
Yeah. Going back to scenarios, scenario-related questions. Let's say a group of students rocks up to a board meeting and demands that you take a position on something that you disagree with. They're quite persistent in their views and trying to get a reaction from or something, out of you. How would you handle it?
Well, look, I think firstly, I would say a lot of the USU meetings are in camera, which is something I would hope to change. But as it stands, I feel like oftentimes students aren't afforded that much transparency into the USU's operations. But I would stick to my principles, I'll stick to my guns when it comes to something like this, because I think ultimately I am accountable to the people that elected me, and the people that elected me because of their good reason, I so hope. And for that, I will just, like, whatever I'm doing, I always have my voters in mind, and I wouldn't compromise on my beliefs, my platform, on my principles, because a group of students, hopefully less than the number that elect me, they're campaigning for me to change my stance. So I would stick to my guns, but I also wouldn't, necessarily engage very heavily with them to like elicit a reaction out of them, or for them to elicit a reaction out of me, because I think discourse to that extent is very counterproductive.
Moving on from that, can you tell me one issue at the university you care really, really deeply about?
Well, have I? Okay, I think I will talk about International House, because I haven't fully mentioned International House in this interview, but I think that is one of the issues I care a lot about. Last year as SRC VP, we started talking with SWIHA, which is the Sydney University International House Alumni Association. And they are arguably even more mad about International House than we are, because they're not getting any more members because there's no more International House alumni. And talking to them, seeing the vibrant community that existed at International House, and the fact that it closed down for basically no reason. It was just COVID, no students, and then the university decided to shut it down for safety, health and safety reasons, when the university is running on a surplus and is able to spend the money to help fix student accommodation. I think it's outrageous, and it's something I really care about. And the university is increasing prices across Regiment, across Queen Mary, when it has a house right there that it can help build. But the university right now is saying, in our negotiations with them, they're saying that they're just going to wait until they reconstruct the entirety of the street that we're on, including Wentworth Building, including the architecture school, including the SRC. And they're going to wait till the very end, because it's at the very end of City Road, to work on International House. And I just think that's a very outrageous policy, because I don't think Wentworth is comparable to International House, because at least one is being used and one isn't.
If elected, which portfolio or portfolios would you prefer to take on?
I would be very interested in, portfolios and committees, or just portfolios?
Can be both.
Okay, international students and clubs and societies, just based on everything I mentioned and my policies and platforms.
Yeah, and I guess on accountability, how would you hold yourself accountable to the students who have voted for you?
Exactly, so I think this is one of the big issues in regards to the USU, because it's a 2-year term, and I think by the second year, many directors forget that this is supposed to be a democratic election process. And one of the policies I would advocate for, and I don't think this is very far-fetched, I think unlike some of my policies and some of everyone's policies, this is a very actionable policy. It's just monthly, or even like once every 2-month meetings, where the USU is able to provide some food and just advertise on the Instagram, get people together, and make sure all 11 accountable board directors are there. And they have a talk with students get to know them, and execs, come up, execs of society, come up, and they complain, or they talk about what the USU is doing well and what the USU is doing poorly. And in that sense, it really brings, I hope, it would bring the board directors down from, whatever floor they are in home building, to actually talk to these students and see what the issues are. And I think that's just a really easy way to make sure that, board directors are engaging with students, even though they might not be on a campaign trail anymore.
Yeah. Moving on from that, you are currently the vice president of the SRC, the vice president of the UN Society, I believe.
Yes.
And USU board is a serious time commitment.
Yes.
So it's a lot of meetings, portfolio work, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
How will you manage all 3 of them?
Well, I think one thing people are, because last year I was also secretary of the UN Society, so it's a very similar commitment. So I was committing basically the same amount of time minus the USU board director commitment last year. And oftentimes people asked me last year why I didn't run for USU board. And I think the reason was exactly that. I wasn't sure what the workload would be for the United Nations Society, but obviously more important, the SRC. I wasn't sure how much time commitment the VP role required, and what was being done, because I was a new student in the SRC back then. But having done 1 year of that, I feel confident in my abilities to carry both of these roles together alongside the USU board director position. I also think that there's a lot of interconnectivity between the obligations of the VP and the work the USU does, especially as I mentioned in regards to SAF applications and especially in regards to Food Hub, which was initially a joint project between the USU and the SRC.
Yeah. I guess there's also a question about how SRC VP and USU board would interact.
Yes.
Particularly given how the SRC has been pressing the USU and BDS.
Yes.
Is there a conflict of interest there? Can you walk me through how you would handle being in the room on the USU board when an issue comes up that the SRC has a public position on?
Well, I think the position of the SRC is something that's passed through council and is passed as a motion. So I assume that would be a position you're talking about. But from my understanding, in my position as a USU board director, I'm not entirely held accountable to that motion. Because that's my role as a USU board director. So I don't see an exact conflict of interest there. If it's a motion, if it's a public-facing SRC position that I agree with, then I will advocate for it. If it's a position that the SRC takes that I might disagree with, then I wouldn't advocate against it. But I wouldn't advocate for one thing or another because of the way the SRC says it per se. But I will say that being involved in the SRC, most of the stances the SRC takes is something I agree with because it's something that I formulate. So I think there's a lot of, what's the word? There's a correlation but not causation though.
So you said that you were wanting to be VP of the SRC, VP of UN Society and USU board at the same time?
Yes.
So if you had to step back from one of those three roles, which would it be?
If it had to step back from one of those three roles, I would step back from VP of SRC. It's something I did last year as well, in semester 2. I resigned it to someone, student politics, but I resigned it to someone in my faction. And it's something, if the workload is too big, I feel more than comfortable doing.
Yeah. As vice president of the SRC, you've been part of an organization that does student advocacy and political work. Structurally, the USU is a different kind of body to an extent. It's more operational and commercial, per se. So what's the case for one student leader holding senior roles in both at the same time?
Well, look, I think there's no negative about it per se. I think it's only, not to my own horn, but having experience in another organization surely only adds experience to, even though it's not completely related, but having been in the SRC surely just adds slightly more experience in my work if I fortunately get elected into the USU. I don't think it would detriment the work I do on the USU board, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So moving on from that, I think you might be aware of this to some extent, but 7 out of 11 candidates this year are studying law.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? I think that's a very interesting question. I would partially attribute it to the success of law students last year. And I would specifically talk about Annika Wang, and this is something I have talked to her about as well. I think she ran a good campaign, and she influenced a lot of first years and second years in voting for her, and that really brought about awareness of the USU. And I think that's why these first years and second years, who are now second years and third years, want to run for the USU because they've learned about it, and last year, like, the law cohort was very much mobilized. I also think Archie ran a very good campaign last year, and he really targeted the debating cohort, and the debating cohort has a lot of interlaps with the law cohort. So I think in general, it's just because the USU has really raised its profile in regards to law students. And law students, I think, also are typically attracted to something that is slightly more political, and like the USU, for example.
Yeah, and I guess with the current representation of candidates running this year, I've heard from certain students that, 7 out of 11 candidates being law students aren't exactly representative or reflective of the broader student body. What do you have to say about that?
I would say I absolutely agree. I think there is a lot of law students running, and I think it will be something that dies down after because there's only 6 people getting up. Like not every law student will get elected. Oh, 5 people getting up. So not every law student will get elected. So I think it's just a phenomenon for this year. But I understand the concern behind it. But I will say I am not running, and I hope none of my fellow candidates are running purely on the platform of being a law student. I think there's so much more to the USU than just that. I think it's very, like, I'm primarily running on my experience as an international student, my experience in the SRC, and my experience in societies. I don't think law really adds that much to my campaign, and I hope my fellow candidates aren't saying that, yeah.
And on this topic, lastly, I guess you already kind of brushed on it. As one of the 7, law students running, what differentiates you from the other 6?
Right. Well, I think primarily I'm an international student. I think there are other international students running. Yes. But I think a primary like how do I say this? Like, I think the key thing is that as an international student and as a student at the University of Sydney, I've tried to be involved in student life. I've tried to be involved in club societies, and I've tried to be involved in other organizations. And I really do value the USU, and that's why I'm not jumping into the USU as my first position. I've tried to explore what university life is about. I've tried to be engaged in a range of structures that are less stakes than the USU to ensure that when I get, and if I get elected to the USU, I can really use those 2 years and prior experience to make a meaningful change instead of spending the first year just getting accustomed to how the USU might work. So I think that is a primary difference between me and my fellow candidates.
Yeah. So let's move on from that, and let's say I'm a politically disengaged student.
Right.
It's campaign season once
Right.
again.
Right.
How would you approach me and pitch yourself in Eastern Avenue?
Well, I think firstly I'd be honored that you stop and talk to me, because that is a lot harder than people seem to think. But assuming that we're engaged in a conversation, I will first talk about the importance of the USU, because it's your school fees that's going to it. It's around $360 a year that you're paying, that is being given to all these student associations, of which the USU is a part of. $8 million of all our fees combined goes to the USU. I think that is the primary reason why we should care about it, because we are stakeholders in the USU. So that is one thing I would like to get across. And after you know what the USU is and how it's relevant to you, I will talk about my policies that I'm bringing to the USU. And primarily, I think I'll talk about, because I'm campaigning to a student, I'll talk about the cost of living on campus. The USU is raising prices. It's like the price of a coffee at Koya now costs like $45. I remember when I first came, it was like three, and like around 4, like start at 4. So I think that is something that's really relevant to us. If you're not able to afford food on campus, it disincentivizes you to go to campus. So I'll really talk about pushing for the $5 meal. I'll talk about my work at Food Hub and what I think Food Hub can become with good leadership. And I'll just talk about increasing the number of outlets and the price of food at these outlets across campus. And I'll really try to just get you sold on that. And if you think there's a better candidate that can deliver that, then be my guest and vote for them. But I think just being goals focused, like trying to get those through. Yeah.
As you are already quite aware, so there's going to be 5 candidates elected.
Yes.
For this election. Let's say you're one of them. Mm-hmm. Which other 4 candidates would you want to work with on the board, and why?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. So I'll start with, because as you know, the USU has AA rules. I would like to work with Nabila. I would like to work with Serena as the 2 AA candidates. And then in terms of the male candidates, there's going to be 2 others, right? I would like to work with Zayed, and I would like to work with James.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think from my conversations with them, ultimately our politics and the things we want to bring to the board and hope the board can achieve are roughly the same. I'm sure there are nuances. I don't think any of those 4 care as much about international student issues as I do, but I'm sure there's things that they are doing that are very cool and very good that I might not have as much knowledge as. But I think at a very baseline level, we are advocating for the same things.
I guess building on that, who do you see as your strongest competition in this race?
Oh, That's a very hard question. I mean, I don't really know as it stands. I mean, I think with so many law students running, I would say Kevin, he's very well known around campus. And I met him personally. I met him in Beijing. He's a really he's a nice guy, but he is competitive. I would say Kevin, but I will also say in terms of Chinese students who like, I hate to reduce people to demographics, but one of the voter bases I would be keen to target would be Chinese students. I know Zhu Songrong or Monica, she is running, and I think there will be competition in that area with her as well. But she is also a great person, and I've had talks with her.
Yeah. And lastly in that, before we get to like, I guess, the lighter questions before we
Of
wrap
course.
up,
Yeah.
why should a student vote for you?
Well, I think if not, okay, so I think I've really outlined my policies, and if you really care about my policies, I think well, there will be a statement, and I think that is the primary reason, because that's why I'm running. But aside from that, I would just say experience. I feel like it's just safe to say I've had more experience than most of my fellow board candidates, if not all, running this cycle. And that's not just my experience in the SRC as VP, but also in clubs and societies. You mentioned I'm VP of the United Nations Society. I also currently sit as treasurer of ACY, Australia-China Youth Association. I've also had previous work done in the executive at the Chinese Law Student Society. You can talk to anyone there. Like, I feel like I've done my work. I've helped contribute to the society, and I don't think anyone there would complain about the work I've done. I haven't like had to like resign because I wasn't replying to messages. So I would say that. I would also say my experience in terms of advocating for student life or talking to university management or other societies or other organizations as a student representative. So that is on the SCC, Student Consultative Committee, where I sat last year. This year I sat on the academic board as one of the SRC representatives. And I also talked with a range of news outlets. I've talked to the Sydney Morning Herald. I've talked to SWIHA, which is the Sydney University International House Alumni Association. So I've experienced like in a broad range of these affairs. And I would really point to my experience as why I think students should vote for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we wrap up, just a few questions for your profile.
Mm-hmm.
So can you please tell us what is your slogan?
Brighter with Bohao.
What is the story behind that slogan?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how did you come up with it,
Mm-hmm.
or if there's a message behind it?
Well, I don't think there's I know some people have very creative slogans. I'm not that creative myself. The two options we had were better with Bohao and brighter with Bohao, and I just thought brighter with Bohao sounded more substantive. I would say that's the extent of it. I wouldn't try to draw an unnecessary parallel between the policies I'm running and the university being brighter per se.
Yeah. What is your campaign color?
Dark orange, I think is the official name for it.
Yeah.
It's a good color.
Yeah.
With
Oh, right. Oh, I got it now. Right.
Can you disclose who your campaign manager is?
Yes, but I don't know her USU ID. That's fine. Xenia Lee. So XENIA.
Yeah. And could you tell us what is your favorite drink to get on campus?
Oh, it's hard. I recently I've been getting iced long blacks, but I don't know how long this will persist. But it's been like for the past year I've been getting them. That's my go.
It'll be long. Yes. And lastly, what is your green flag and red flag?
Oh, on the spot? Wow.
Yes.
I think red flag would definitely be someone that doesn't vote for me in the USU elections coming up May 18th to May 22nd. And green flag would be someone that votes for me in the USU elections coming up May 18th to May 22nd.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Is
that fine?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Of
You have
course.
completed your on-site
Yay.
interview.
Thank you guys.
Yes.
Thank you for the work you do.
Good job.
How many did you have today?
3.